Welcome, folks, to the Far Cry 20th Anniversary celebration. I'm your host, Chris Waters from the Ubisoft News team, and today I'll be joined by developers from throughout the history of Far Cry to share stories and insights about the innovations, the challenges, the moments that have made these games so memorable. Before we get started, I'll let you know this show is pre-recorded. If you're watching live on Twitch, we've got Twitch Drops activated as a little thank you for joining us. Just make sure your Twitch account and your Ubisoft account are linked. And finally, today is not a day for announcing new projects, but you may hear some new stories, even if you've been a Far Cry fan since the very beginning. So let's get started and kick things off with a special Far Cry anniversary tribute created just for this show.
It all started 20 years ago. From the beginning, we wanted Far Cry to go beyond the typical shooter.
That is crazy.
Dropping you into the most isolated places with the bare minimum to survive. We made it our goal to bring you into the strangest places, somewhere between reality and fiction. We gave you the tools to craft your own story and find your own path. Far Cry pulled you down the rabbit hole more than once. You embraced it at every turn, diving into the madness again and again, where you met helpful friends, terrifying foes, and
Sure, right into the camera. There we are.
well, something in between. From the heat of a tropical island to the peaks of the Himalayas, you survived an apocalypse and took down vicious leaders. 20 years ago, you stepped into new worlds and turned them into something incredible. To the 90 million players who embrace our insanity, thank you.
And with that 20th anniversary tribute to get us in the mood, let's get into our discussions today by welcoming our first guests, JC Guyot and Andrew Holmes. JC, thanks so much for being here today.
Thank you. I'm really excited about this celebration. It's 9 exciting games, and I can't wait to talk about it.
Yeah, we're going to have some fun. Drew, how you doing, my man?
I'm doing good. 20 years is a long time. I think we're both feeling a little bit old, seasoned, but we're excited to talk about all things Far Cry today.
Excellent. It's time to treasure some memories, gents.
Do it.
All right. Let's first start off by introducing kind of yourselves and your role on Far Cry. Establish your bona fides, you know what I mean? Like, JC, what is your history on the Far Cry games?
So I'm JC. Currently, I work as a creative director on the Far Cry franchise team. And a few years back, making me old, I was a creative director on Far Cry Primal.
Excellent. Drew, how about you?
Yeah, so I'm also on the franchise team. I'm the IP director, and I started on Far Cry with Far Cry 5 as the lead writer, and they have not been able to get rid of me since.
You're stuck. You're here for the next 20.
Unfortunately. For them.
Fortunately for us. So, guys, let's talk about Far Cry. You know, a 20th anniversary celebration kind of invites reminiscing, invites retrospection, and the gamut of Far Cry games covers a lot of territory, but each one of them has those things that makes it Far Cry. What are some of those things? Let's get into it and talk about those pillars, those things that really make a Far Cry game a Far Cry.
Yeah, definitely. I think at the heart of Far Cry, there's really the notion of throwing the player in exotic locations around the world and in situations where they're in way over their heads. And where they have to survive both the dangers of wild nature and human nature with the antagonists that we have, and then also giving them the tools and the toys to be creative about how they approach this and how they manage to survive these dangers and ultimately go from prey to predator.
Prey to predator.
Yeah, it's a term we use a lot on the franchise team. It really is kind of this. Every protagonist, every character that you're embodying is kind of the fish out of water, right? You're not prepared for the situation you're being thrown into. You don't know what is going to be around the corner. You're probably unfamiliar with the place, and you've got very sort of limited amount of supplies. And then it's like shit hits the fan, and what are you going to do? How far are you willing to go? What lengths are you willing to go to survive? And making sure that we are sort of putting you in morally ambiguous, morally compromising situations. You think you know who you are at the start, but very quickly you realize, hey, I need to sort of recalibrate my brain for what's happening in front of me and what is being asked of me.
Yeah, I always appreciated those moments where, you're certainly getting the sense that you're upping the ante from the new kit you're unlocking, the gear you're getting, the challenges you're taking on. But those moments where maybe the protagonist character is saying something like, whoa, or like, oh, I can't believe that just happened. Like you're having those moments of realization that like it is escalating, because escalation, yeah, that's a Far Cry thing as well.
Yeah. I think that, we sort of look at it in terms of us as humans. We have this primal instinct to survive, and that is kind of what we want to infuse in every single Far Cry experience. It's putting you in a situation where you're going to have to start. We're pushing you closer and closer towards that edge of insanity, the falling into an abyss of madness. But it really is up to you, the player, and also the character that you're embodying to adapt or die.
Adapt or die. I'd have done both. The latter, like more than I'd care to admit, but that's part of the fun, right? Now we're talking about kind of the player's journey, right? That predator or that prey to predator. But let's talk about like where these journeys are taking place, JC, because from Yara to Kyrat to the Rook Islands to 10,000 BC. I mean, we're running the gamut.
Yeah, it's all about the location. The location is the star of the show in many ways because it represents not only the location but also the bad guys that inhabit it, and so that's a really core element. And over the years, in Far Cry 3 with Rook Island, with Far Cry 4 in Kyrat, etc., we've been able to go to different locations around the world and really dive deep into making sure that these places felt alive, felt grounded, realistic, that all the systems and the people that inhabit them make sense, and that players could get lost in that, find the beautiful places, the marvelous visuals that you discover as you pass a hill and you discover the beauty of Kyrat, for example, in Far Cry 4. But then also all the setups for the people that inhabit it and that create a lot of dangers and opportunities, and especially the wildlife of each region, which wreaks havoc on players and AIs alike.
Yeah, and AIs alike. That's a good point, because that emergent kind of chaos of like, I'm not getting attacked by a turkey, but that guy is. Like, this is a dangerous place.
The anecdote factory.
Yeah. Internally, it's what we call the anecdote factory. It's all the systems, the toys, the animals, etc., that really collide together in order to create unique situations that are different for every player. It's the animal you accidentally set on fire that starts to run and propagates the fire up to your car that explodes. It's this kind of situations where you free a hostage
or
and
get eaten by a bear.
Yeah, they run away, they get eaten by a bear, or you get attacked in the middle of what you were trying to do, scouting an outpost, and suddenly there's a tiger that jumps onto you. So all these elements are creating unique stories for every player, and that's where the games really come alive, I think.
I think it's the cohesion of the world too, right? So JC's talked about all those locations, and what are the pieces of conflict, and what are the sort of obstacles that are standing in front of the player in that quest to survive, or in sort of achieving their goal. But it's the characters as well, making sure that the characters fit within that surreal, crazy situation that we're thrusting the player into, and then the antagonist sort of sitting at the top, right? They're the ultimate force that you're going to have to go through in order to make it out alive, right? Like everything sort of has to build up from the sort of the source of that location, the conflict, into that ultimate big bad.
And that big bad always makes such a first impression, such an indelible impression, but where it goes from those first moments where you start to understand who they are to then you like get the full picture of what Joseph Seed is all about and what he's willing to do. And it's kind of like, man, like I don't know, man. It's like y'all go some places, right?
Yeah.
Like
it's I think with with all the Far Cries, I think especially like starting with 2 and 3 and beyond, like there's this notion of this psychological rabbit hole. There's this a bit of Heart of Darkness feel to it. We talk about becoming the jungle, right? It's a journey that you're gonna go on where you really are forced to confront with the sort of primal nature of yourself. Right? We are not who we think we are when shit hits the fan. That's kind of the basic premise.
And we were seeing earlier, the shit hitting the fan with a lot of those clips that folks were creating in the community. But to bring it back to these characters, these antagonists, and sort of the journeys we go on with them, and like them getting more and more intense as our experience and things we have to do gets that intense. I think that's part of what helps people resonate with these characters. Do you think? Like what sort of draws us to them?
Yeah, I think when you sort of see the community and how they sort of embrace every character and every setting and every story, I think that people kind of really buy into the notion of it feels good to be bad sometimes. And one, when you see all the fan art in terms of the antagonists or the animals, or the fangs for hire, right? Like so Boomer and Guapo and all that stuff. There's a lot of love on the community side. And so I think that I think people are buying into the idea of wanting to go on this very dangerous journey, and there's a titillation that sort of occurs as well.
Yeah, and then you see that people responding to that in so many ways, from fan art to cosplay, kind of really getting outside of the media of games and expressing themselves in that way. And speaking of getting outside the media of games, folks, I know you've seen them here. Yes, this is a transition. We're going to talk a little bit about what's on the table here in a moment. But JC, you were talking about, Primal and Blood Dragon. These are like wild scenarios that really flex the kind of core tenets, the core pillars of Far Cry. And now, these things we're seeing, Drew, you yourself worked on kind of like bringing it to, we've got a manga, we've got a board game. We're going to talk about them here real quick.
Yeah.
Talk to us about the manga first.
Yeah, so we sort of look at Far Cry, the brand, as kind of this canvas to be able to tell lots of different types of stories, and so not just in games, but in other media as well. And so, we're always looking for ways to kind of expand the way that our audience can engage with it. So one of the things, I'm going to hold up the camera. I'm going to do a little bit of a product placement.
Nailed it.
There's on Free Comic Book Day, we are going to be having the first issue of a manga in collaboration with Tokyo Pop and a great writer by the name of Ryan Nichols. It's a bit of a Far Cry what if called Far Cry Cull the Herd, and not to spoil too much, but it's taking the quintessential Far Cry antagonists, all the villains that you're familiar with, and kind of putting them in a bit of a battle royale-esque scenario. But the fun twist is that all of the villains are basically teenagers. So you're meeting them all at a moment in time before they've become the monsters who they're sort of destined to be. And the theme of the entire series is really about the nature of evil. Right? Is it innate in us, or is it something learned through our experiences? It's fun. I encourage people to check it out when it's available. In addition, we also have, I think we're announcing it for the first time. I don't know. We'll see. We have a Far Cry board game. So people are going to be able, for the first time, to have a Far Cry experience on tabletop in collaboration with FunForge. It's Far Cry Escape from Rook Island. So
evil teenagers here. That's the manga.
I mean,
mostly.
everything. Aren't all teenagers a little bit of evil? In Far Cry, everything's a little bit evil. No, but the thing is, so again, in a bit of a Far Cry what if scenario, the board game is going to kind of retell the story of Far Cry 3. So you're going to be encountering Voss. But there's a couple different twists because it's not the Far Cry 3 story as you understand it. It's kind of been reimagined for a cooperative board game experience.
Ooh, okay.
It's pretty cool.
You had me at cooperative. That's the kind of board game experience I like. So, folks, board game later this summer, and the manga on May 4th, Free Comic Book Day. You can get the first issue. And if you heard Cull the Herd and started having like Pavlovian flashbacks to a red lit room in the White Horse Mountains, you're not alone. That was I had a moment there. Thanks for the breakdown, Drew.
Sure.
Now we've got some more folks to come on and chat Far Cry. Different stories coming our way, but I can't let you go without getting some more stories out of you. And this is when I want you to take a little more personal sort of bent at it. Like, you've spent a lot of professional time in the world of Far Cry, but also as a player, also as someone who has been in these worlds yourselves, you got to have those moments. You got to have those special things, those things that when people start talking about Far Cry, you want to tell this story. You want it to be like, oh, but when you do this, or oh, that moment. Drew, let's start with you. What is that moment? What are some of those moments for you?
My quintessential Far Cry moments, I think for me, I'm a very sort of exploratory player, so I'm getting lost in the jungle, in the woods, wherever it is. And for me, it's always, I'm out, I'm exploring, I'm having a good time, and then you hear that sound, and it's just, what animal is going to ruin my day now? Whether it's encountering the cassowary in Far Cry 3 and running for your life, or the
Badger.
eagle.
Badger,
The eagle
We'll
in
accept all
Far
of
Cry
these
4
answers.
just absolutely, it screams, it's down on top of you. In Far Cry Primal, it's night, okay, it's scary, and then you just see the glowing eyes of the wolves, and you're like, I'm not making it through. It's
Like,
it's
thanks,
those,
JC.
Those animal encounters, I think for me, are always something that I'm looking forward to in every experience. And then sort of more on the story side, the sort of the delving into the psychology of the narrative and all that, I'm going to be extremely biased and say, meeting the father for the first time.
Yeah.
Taking him away from the cult, seeing what kicks off from that, and the horrible helicopter crash at the end of that. That's, to me, I spent a lot of my life working on that moment, so it's always going to stick with me.
Well, we're going to look at it right now.
Oh,
We're going to take you
God.
back through this moment and just really get you into there, and we'll chat with you about it.
About my
once we're done.
PTSD.
Yeah. We're going to get it. It's going to come out here just in a moment, folks. Let's take a look at trying to arrest the father.
I saw when the Lamb opened the first seal, and I heard, as it were the noise of thunder, one of the four beasts say, "Come and see."
Step forward.
And I saw. And behold, it was a white horse. And hell followed with him.
Rookie, cuff this son of a bitch.
God will not let you take me.
This is how you would
inviting.
This is how you would
Come
take
on,
his hands.
do it. I dare you.
Right? Or are you going to cuff him? Are you going to take those hands? Because, I'm sorry, I got to bring this up here. This is one of those, like, choice moments that
It
you kind
is.
of have, like, that, like, oh, maybe you just want to roll credits
gonna
too,
do?
and you want to
Yeah.
get out of here because
Yeah.
this is looking a little spicy. And those moments are in a couple of the Far Cry games. Talk to me a little bit. I know there's a little bit of deviation. I wanted to delve into the psychology of Drew, but like, what do those moments mean? Why are they in here? Like, what is the significance of those kind of choice moments in Far Cry games?
Yeah, I think it's again, we're going to put you in a scenario that is never going to happen in real life, and you're going to go on a journey that feels But I think that it's allowing the players to opt in to this experience that they're about to have, right? So you're sitting there, whether it's in Far Cry 4, Pagan says, "Hey, I'll be right back. Don't go anywhere." There's an opportunity that's put in front of the player to say, "Should I wait?"
I could eat.
Like, it's the song, right? Like the song is playing. Should I stay or should I go? Right before that scene, like it's literally asking the player, "What would you do in this scenario?" And if you're willing to make a choice that seems a little bit dangerous, okay, then you're buying into the scenario. You're punching your ticket to say, I want to see how deep this rabbit hole goes. That's the notion that we wanted to again sort of step on with Far Cry 5 and say, you sure you want to do this? Because if you're committing to this, there's going to be no exit ramp. And again, you see it again in Far Cry 6 with Danny, and that all Danny wants is to get on that boat and to get the hell out and go to the U.S. And after a little bit of time, it's like, okay, that boat's there. You can take it. You can leave. You do not have to engage yourself in this conflict. And so I think that it allows it for a bit more of real engagement. And the stakes that are happening are because you chose to put yourself into this scenario.
The Danny one, I think, is my favorite because there is so much buildup of her being like, I just need to get on a boat. I want to be on a boat. And then you get on that boat and you're like, I could just get out of here. I could have my freedom. Oh, it's so good.
Yeah.
All right, JC, let's switch it over to you. We had some sort of, animal moments with Drew. We got those kind of gameplay experiences. What resonates for you when you think of that Far Cry experience that you had personally?
Yeah, I have very vivid memories, especially about the time before I worked on Far Cry. So older games, Far Cry, the very first one, I have these memories where you walk through the polygonal jungle at the time, and so you're stalking around patrols that are looking for you on the road, and it's really these moments where you get to be the predator. You're there and you choose how you want to attack this. And for me, that's something that's been present from the get-go. Like, it's a very unique proposition in Far Cry, but it's also something that's been translated. It's your battle your way in a lot of ways. It's how you approach an outpost in Far Cry 3. It's how all the opportunities that are created for you to really decide how you engage with the systems of the world. And so for me, that notion of stalking your prey was very core and very present, very vivid in Far Cry in the very first one.
Yeah, and that freedom that you had in that space to do that, to be that predator. And then Far Cry Primal, of course, when you're creative director there, is that you're taking predator and prey to like a whole new degree when you go back that far.
It's the most extreme version of the prey. We are like, how can we be at the bottom of the food chain? And so that's at the time where nature was bigger than man, etc. So that was the inception of Far Cry Primal.
Yeah, and that those huge, just mega fauna, like, oh, they're coming after you. Oh, it's not good.
And more on the story side, like seeing the box for the Far Cry Rook Island board game, definitely Vas was a very strong memory, especially the definition of insanity speech. That's a moment where the character, it's one of the first times where you really feel the character being present with you in the scene and being so menacing, so charming at the same time. It's a very impactful mix in my memory.
It's indelible, right? And also the way that then was carried through with other Far Cry, of that. This person's a little close to my camera. Like, this villain is a little larger than life, a little close for comfort. And we're gonna have you experience that right now, folks. We've got the clip. We're going to check out the definition of insanity speech, talk a little bit more about it when we return.
Did I ever tell you what the definition of insanity is? Insanity is doing the exact same fucking thing over and over again, expecting shit to change. That is crazy. The first time somebody told me that, I don't know, I thought they were bullshitting me, so boom, I shot him. The thing is, okay, he was right. And then I started seeing it everywhere I looked, all these fucking pricks, everywhere I looked, doing the exact same fucking thing, over and over and over and over and over again, thinking, this time, it's gonna be different. No, please. This time, it's gonna be different. I'm sorry. I don't like the way you are looking at me. Okay? You have a fucking problem in your head. Do you think I'm bullshitting you? Do you think I'm lying? Fuck you! Okay? Fuck you! It's okay, man. I'm gonna chill here, man. I'm gonna chill. The thing is, alright? The thing is, I killed you once already. And it's not like I am fucking crazy. It's okay. It's like water under the bridge. Did I ever tell you the definition of insanity? Oh, Jesus. Oh, fuck you!
What do you think, JC? Still hits?
Chilling. It's crazy how it starts mellow, like you wake up and then starts to talk, almost charming, slowly becomes menacing. Then you see the block, you see the rope, and it's you kind of know where this is going.
Yeah, you know where it's going to happen. It's happening to someone in the background. They're just like, ugh. And the inevitability of it, their powerlessness of it. They're like, you are really in this person's thrall. It's frightening, but also like, I want to see this guy again. Like, I want to know more about where this character goes. It's an electric scene. I still remember that E3 demo on stage when first presented that, and man, whoa! I hope your folks out there are not getting the chills too much. I definitely am. Guys, thank you so much for sharing the memories. Appreciate it. I'd love to pick your brains for the whole rest of the show, but I've got new brains to pick coming out here very shortly.
Picking us out?
Yes,
Whatever.
but not before I give you, like a little parting moment. We're here in front of the audience celebrating Far Cry's 20th anniversary. Do you have any messages for the folks watching in the community out there that you'd like to share?
Definitely, nothing that we saw wouldn't be possible without all the teams, their dedication, their passion all around the world. And so that's a shout out to the Far Cry teams that have worked on these 20 years and these 9 games. So congratulations and thank you.
Yeah.
And I think, too, the community, the fans, everyone who's watching. 20 years is a long time. A lot of entertainment franchises don't make it that long. So, without the support and the love and the cosplay and the embracing of crazy, sociopathic, violent, murderous characters that, not gonna lie, it's a take, but we love the fact that there's been so much passion for what has been and what is yet to come. So thanks to everyone for watching this.
And thanks to you too, JC and Drew, for chatting with me. Folks, I'm going to bring on some new guests here in just a moment, but a few reminders before we go. If you're watching this live on twitch.tv/Ubisoft, you're getting some drops today if you make sure your Ubisoft account is linked with your Twitch account. Now, again, this is a pre-recorded conversation, so we can't see your chats or comments, but be sure we'll be checking up on them because we want to hear your stories as well, your moments, what you think makes a Far Cry game a Far Cry game. Our next guests have arrived, and joining me here now, we have Clint Hocking, Navid Khavari, and Ann Farmer. Don't worry, I'll get you all each a chance to introduce yourselves here as part of our Far Cry 20th anniversary celebration. Clint, let's start with you, my man. Welcome.
Hey, thanks. Good to be here.
Excited to have you here. Let's just give folks a little overview of what your role has been on Far Cry. What put you in the couch today?
Well, I was the creative director on Far Cry 2 way back in 2005, 6, 7, 8. We shipped in 2008, so it was quite a long time ago now. But that was my first gig as just a creative director on when we took Far Cry internally and it became a Ubisoft brand officially for the first time. And previous to that, I'd worked on Splinter Cell Chaos Theory and the original Splinter Cell, so it was a big change of pace for me.
And a memorable one for sure.
Very memorable, memorable development, memorable game. One I'm very proud of, actually.
We'll be hauling out some of those stories today. Navid Khavari, please introduce yourselves. Talk to us about your Far Cry.
Yeah, I'm a narrative director at Ubisoft. My Far Cry journey begins all the way back in 13 with Far Cry 4, then moved on to Primal, then moved to Far Cry 5, and then on to Far Cry 6. So really just looking at all aspects of narrative on those.
Excellent. And speaking of Primal, Ann Farmer representing over here.
Yes. So my Far Cry journey started on Far Cry Primal, and then I was on Far Cry 5, Far Cry 6. So it's a bit of like the end cap of the Far Cry journey.
Absolutely. Well, thanks y'all for giving us that context for folks. We've got creative director, narrative director, and your focus is on the production side, like producer kind of role.
Yeah, so I'm a production director. And when I got my start on Far Cry, I was a project closer. So it's kind of like a specialized producer that comes in at the end of the project and helps the team ship the best quality game in the time we have available.
And you've got some stories from that we're going to mine into a little bit later. But I want to start this discussion kind of by winding it way back to the beginning of Far Cry at Ubisoft. You mentioned it a little bit earlier, Clint, how Far Cry 2, the sort of first Ubisoft takes it on, creative development, concept, everything. So talk to us kind of about the genesis of that project, where you kind of set the scope from the beginning for Far Cry 2.
Yeah, I mean, I guess around the time that I was finishing out Chaos Theory, the original Far Cry shipped, and this the game was amazing, right? This it wasn't an open world, but this tropical island with this great sense of adventure and stuff you'd never seen before. This huge open feeling world, And then when Ubisoft kind of got ownership of the brand and they wanted to make a sequel, a Far Cry 2, I was kind of done making Splinter Cell games, and they asked me if I wanted to take over that as the creative director, and kind of brought a small team together around me. There was 5 or 6 of us at the start, and just started talking about what that game could be and how we could make a great sequel to the original Far Cry. There had been some console ports and stuff like that, and that we'd made internally, but this was going to be, kind of we were going to have a 2. We were really going to be the real sequel, and we were going to get back on PC and really take that engine and really go hard into the PC market as well as the the coming console generation. And so, it was really going just down to the floorboards on the CryEngine at the time and building it back up into what would become the Dunia engine at that time, and turning it into a true open world game. That was our biggest ambition, I think, from the start, was instead of this sort of linear level-based game in very large levels like the original Far Cry was, we wanted to make a real open world game. At that time, when we first started, there was no other open world first-person shooter on the market. That concept didn't exist. So we needed to figure out, what does it mean to make most first-person shooters have this very controlled pacing, and they may not necessarily be linear environments. They may have a bit of non-linearity branching to them, whatever, but ultimately a linear flow through the game and a lot of forward pressure, which is really different from most open world games. And so making an open world first person shooter was just a completely new thing, and it was really exciting.
It's hard to imagine no open world first person shooter really there, like charting that course. Working with the team to kind of figure out those many design challenges. Of course, you've also written numerous times over the years about these, and as those innovations sort of started coming to the fore, what was something that you grappled onto as okay, we're getting it. Okay, it's getting there. Was there that kind of crystallizing, galvanizing moment?
I mean, there were many important moments over the course of development. I'm sure we'll talk about a bunch of them, but I think one thing that was really, really critical was just the recognition that this was a game that was built out of systems and out of NPC player interaction and the fire propagation, the vehicles, like all of the ingredients that come into play was. Again, I worked on Splinter Cell previously, where everything is every light switch is exactly perfectly placed by hand, right? And this is very emergent and very systemic and very rich. And so one of the only ways to know that that's working is to just play the game constantly. And we were playing the game very, very, very early. Within the first 9 months, we were playing the game before we even had the ability to dynamically stream an open world in a 1 square kilometer chunk of the world. We were playing the game in what would become our sort of internal demo for the game, and it was fun from the beginning. The
dream,
the kind of chaos, the explosions, the way the AI was interacting, the way they take cover and try to surround you and put pressure on you, and you'd have to push back, and we had sort of faked fire propagation at that time to create some of the context that you'd feel in the game. It was just really something we'd never experienced before, and it was fun from the very beginning.
That's very cool. I know that certainly over the course of developing a game, there's lots of moments that, is it quite coming together? Maybe it's not even playable as early as that case. But Navid, thinking back to, the Far Cries within your kind of scope, was there a similar crystallizing moment? It's fun to play now, like we're onto something.
There's always a few, I think, in each project. I think back to on Far Cry 4, we did some of the Shangri-La missions where you would have a tiger as a companion, and the moment you send your tiger to attack, it's like, okay, this is Far Cry for sure. I know where I am. I know what we're doing. But I think probably the biggest innovation and one of the most satisfying innovations was on Far Cry Primal, where we worked with linguists for Proto-Indo-European language. They crafted an entire language for players to experience, and if you think about it, it's like, oh, that's kind of cool, but then there are all the ramifications of that, right? Like, it's going to be subtitled the entire time. Are players going to be able to follow what's going on? Are they going to, understand the performance capture? Are the actors going to be able to communicate in the same way? And that whole process was so fascinating. And when I look back on it now, I'm like, wow, that was a huge risk, we took. And I think, just seeing the feedback from players, seeing the responses of the performers to learning the language and communicating with each other, and like learning to communicate with their bodies as well through that. We worked with folks like Terry Notary, who did a lot of the sort of Planet of the Apes, the modern Planet of the Apes sort of performance capture. And we brought him in for a rehearsal so the actors would learn how to reduce their modern movements, So when I think of innovation, my heart kind of goes to Primal always. Just it was one of the most satisfying experiences you could have.
That phrase, reduce your modern movement.
Yeah.
Like, it just seems, by sort of taking a fresh look at something that you might take for granted, like the language the game is spoken in, does that like break open these kind of other ways you're used to working and just generate that kind of opportunity for creative space?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, even I remember we were in this big rehearsal space, and he's teaching actors how to sit in a chair. You're sitting at like, you've sat on this chair 1,000 times. No, like, you got to look uncomfortable. You have to break your movements apart. And he would really just build up that performance from scratch, and then the movement coaches took it from there for the rest of the mocap, working with our Cinemax director David Footman. But yeah, and I think that spirit of innovation, when you're as bold to go that far with something, it translates to the rest of the team as well, where you want to try new things. So it's just incredibly satisfying.
That's very cool. Now, we're talking about kind of an innovation that's at the genesis or earlier in the creative process, but sometimes that stuff comes kind of down to the wire when you got to figure out how to make things work that aren't quite coming together, or you see opportunities late in the game.
Yeah, so I think production, especially late in the game, is about assessing risk and really, really gambling. Like you mentioned in the early game, you really have to assess risk, and I think that's just production. And so we really give people kind of like the framework and when we need to get something done. And so what happened is we got some feedback multiple times about and this was on Far Cry Primal, about how it felt kind of sluggish to go through the world. I mean, it's Primal. You don't have the big trucks that you have in previous Far Cries to kind of move through the world. So we tried speed buffs. No one really used them. We tried increasing player speed. Nobody. And so like our lead designer on Far Cry Primal came forward and he was like, look, I got an idea. It's kind of crazy. I was just like, okay, being the closer, I'm really like, guys, we got to get this thing shipped. Let's go. I'm like, okay, what's your idea? And so he laid out the idea to say, what if we rode the saber-tooth tiger? And it's like, okay, that's real risky. This is like a couple months from
risk
us
assessment.
shipping. So I'm like, okay, is there a way that we can toggle this so if it's completely busted, we can just turn it off and find another solution? He's like, yeah, we got this. So I was like, realistically, this is highly risky. Go ahead and try it. And so the team worked really hard to get it in the game, and that's what shipped. And it's like, honestly, it's one of the most memorable things about Far Cry Primal in terms of gameplay. And I think it was really cool when the team just kind of, they had an idea. It was super risky, and it was just like, okay, try it. And it worked.
Good on you. I remember when that came in, sitting at my desk, like it was like the breath of air, just like, oh my god, this feels so good. And then I just forgot about the rest of the game. I'm just running around on my saber-tooth. That's awesome.
And you get to pet the tiger. It's great. You know what? I'm a big saber-tooth tiger petter. It's great.
Hell yes.
You said a phrase when you were just telling that story, the kind of like the designer coming to you and saying, this sounds crazy, but
yes,
I feel like Clint, there was probably a lot of that on Far Cry 2, or maybe that was that just the default? Because I mean, you're taking on open world shooter. Like, was it kind of the default of just like we're trying, like we're being bold in all areas?
I mean, yes, there was an enormous amount of like what if and how do we solve these problems, right? Although really, Far Cry, again, compared to Splinter Cell and other games that we were working on at the time, Far Cry is, especially Far Cry 2, is actually a fairly simple game, right? You have 4 guns. It's not like modern Far Cry's. You got a wheel and 17 guns and all these attachments and all of this stuff. You got 4 guns, pick them from the wall, go to the dot and kill everybody. That's the game, right? That's the game. It's like I said, it's a first-person shooter. And, some of the questions that we had on the team and some of the challenges that we had on the team were like, what do you mean that the town doesn't have, a blacksmith and like, or whatever, shops that you can buy stuff and like, what about experience points and all of this stuff? It's like, no, guys, we're not, just because it's an open world, at the time, an open world game was an RPG, right? Like that's what open world games were. They were always RPGs. And so our town doesn't have vendors. Our town doesn't have civilians with fetch quests. Our town doesn't have side quests. The town is full of bad people who will kill you if you point your gun at them, right? And like it's a ceasefire, and that's as good as it's ever going to be. And so the pressure was sometimes like we got to put these other tropes from these other genres in here, but it's like no, we're making a first-person shooter. The game is go there and kill everyone. Well, what about that was another one, fast travel. Like, well, I don't know. I've been to that camp and I've been to that camp. Why can't I just fast travel between them? It's because it's the same reason you don't fast travel in first-person shooters. The game is getting to the thing that you're getting to. It's not being there to press Y on the Switch, right? And so, and yeah, there was some pushback from fans. I think that players at the time, a lot of players didn't understand what a first-person shooter in an open world was either. Now it's just a kind of game. We know it now, right?
Yeah.
But back then it was really weird. So we didn't have as feature-rich a game as the more modern Far Cries were, because we were really, I don't want to say stripped down. We were focused on the core of the experience, which was intense, reactive gun battles and player improvisation in this really dynamic context with the AI and the weaponry and the fire propagation stuff that evolved to become what we internally call the Anecdote Factory, was kind of born there in those burning fields in the savannah, right? And that was the thing we just kept refining.
Well, let's talk a little bit about that last one, the fire propagation, because this is one of those things where you are really end up grounding the player in, like, this is a world that I am a part of.
Yeah.
I did that. I am seeing the effects of this.
Yeah.
And then, of course, like the fire that spread throughout the rest of the franchise. But lighting fires that go across the savannah, maybe not the easiest thing to put together.
Yeah, it was definitely challenging. Like I said, in the very beginning, we had sort of fake fire prop. We had like zones that a designer could define, right? And they had some maximum size, whatever it was. And we used them in different places to test out some things. But there was always this questioning, because we had dynamic trees and dynamic vegetation and grass and all of this stuff. And there was always this question of like, could we take this a little bit further and get rid of this sort of designer authored fire propagation and just let it loose in the world? And we sat down and worked out a design with some of the programmers and myself and the game designers, and then one of the programmers sat down and put it together for probably a couple weeks, I guess, and turned it on. And I remember the first time that I saw real fire propagation. I was just playtesting the game. There was I think we were getting ready for some internal milestone or something, and there was sort of a walkthrough kind of that we were focused on. And so I went to this train yard, I think it was, and you go there and get in a big gunfight, whatever. On the way there, I'd gotten in some gunfight in some little shanty or whatever. And on the way back, I'm kind of driving my truck, and I crest this hill back into this valley where I'd been on the way through. And as I'm cresting the hill, my frame rate just goes choom, 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 choom. And we were working on really high end machines for the time, because we were in dev, so everything's always, your code's always slow and laggy. And so normally I would have a frame rate of 40s, something 50s or something, even with our sloppy code. And my frame rate just went doom, 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 down to 3. I'm like, what? Oh no, I'm gonna crash, right? And kind of over the hill. and the whole the whole game world, all the way to the horizon, was on fire. And I was like, what the fuck? Whoa!
What have I wrought?
And it's because when I'd come through, I'd started a fire and left it behind, and everything had just propagated. And because the streaming wasn't in and that wasn't being unloaded or refreshed, it just kept burning the entire time I was over there. And when I came back in and it needed to render, it was just from all the way to the horizon. The whole valley was on fire. And it was amazing. It was like, this is awesome. I could just light the thing on fire and like go make a sandwich and come back and the
That's
game's
the most
over.
Far
Like
Cry thing ever.
You win, like some rolling credits.
You.
No, and so obviously we had to tune how the fire propagation worked and like rebalance it so that it would, be able to contain itself and not just propagate forever. But yeah, it was really amazing. It was a really great feeling.
The Clint burned down the build like, takes on a different meaning.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
But I think that's so interesting because it kind of became the DNA of the franchise a little bit too. Those unintended consequences, and it goes to seeing the fans play as well, like watching videos on YouTube of how they're, strapping C4 to turtles. It's like, oh, okay, you're gonna do something like that, or it was the shovel gun, I think, on 5. And it's, fans should know we're watching how they experiment with this stuff, and we're like, oh yeah, we could throw that in the game, but it feels like it goes right back to 2.
It's in the roots of the franchise for sure.
Yeah, I remember like the first time I picked up Far Cry, it was right before I joined the Far Cry Primal team to help them get it closed down. So I started up Far Cry 4. I was like, okay, I've never played Far Cry before. Let's get in this. And there's that first tutorial mission where it's like, okay, you need to like shoot the cage. We're teaching you how to use this. So shoot the cage so the tiger attacks the man. I was like, okay, I can do that. So I shot the cage and the tiger attacked me. And so I was like, okay, this is hardcore. That's pretty great. And then, I joined the Primal team. First time I boot the build. I start the game and I get eaten by a bear. Far Cry 5, same thing. I boot the game, trying out the game for the first time, get eaten by a bear. So I just assumed getting eaten by a bear
was intended the whole time.
Authentic Far Cry experience.
But it's like that's something that's so unique to Far Cry. Yeah, exactly. It's something that's so unique to Far Cry is that you boot the game and like that's my Far Cry experience, but that's different than y'all's Far Cry experience, and I think that's super cool.
Yeah, super true.
The different experiences we each own as we play. You're thinking of that, and I'm like, yes. And then came Cheeseburger.
Oh,
and
Cheeseburger.
I was not being eaten by the bear. My friend the bear was eating other people.
I will. That was in the region that Toronto studio worked on, and I will always have like a place in my heart for Cheeseburger the bear. Like, what a character.
What a character. And Navid, you said character. I want to bring in the characters of Far Cry because, Clint, you kind of touched on it earlier in that first-person shooter focus. You certainly had characters, and I want to talk about those in a minute. But, like, a lot of places hostile that you go.
Absolutely.
Now, certainly lots of Far Cry places are hostile, but more and more we start to see as the franchise goes on, your allies, the villains, the characters you encounter and that help make the world and help make your experience as the player. Navid, from the narrative perspective, what kind of player changes have you seen over the course of the most recent Far Cry?
Well, it's interesting because I think one of the biggest things that you sort of attribute, and I think you could say it's part of the DNA of the brand now, is I hesitate using the word villain because it's really just a character with a fascinating point of view. You know what I mean? And that's how we always try to approach it. And I go back to I have a very distinct memory of when we met with Giancarlo Esposito for Far Cry 6. That's what drew him really to the character. It wasn't so much, oh, I get to play this evil dictator. It was, oh, this is a father. Oh, how do I connect to that relationship to my son and how I might be twisting my son in a way that I don't even intend. And I think, that speaks to the crux of what I think is so memorable about Voss, Pagan Min. These are characters that when you sit down, often quite literally at a table with them, as a player, you should be thinking, okay, you're an awful, terrible individual. But deep down, I'm wondering if I might slightly agree with some of the stuff you're saying,
Mm-hmm.
you know, and I think that's what's so crucial. And then, you know, on the sort of, maybe more on the protagonist side, my approach, the team's approach, was always to try and find those little hooks that we can kind of relate to. I think both on Primal and 6, it was, you know, we were very fortunate that, you know, we got to, instead of being a character from outside the country or the region, it's homegrown. This is your country. This is your land. You're not just, you know, fighting for, you know, yes, to survive, but you're also fighting for a bigger cause. And so those were hooks that sort of developed over time that were really fun to dive in on. But it all goes back to what and how can I connect to these characters, that I think is what makes the best Far Cry characters.
Yeah, that I was just thinking about Danny Rojas and all the vocalizations of just like having those serendipitous moments where I would do something, I would react and be like, "Oh my god," and then Danny would be like, "Oh my god," like those.
That is an art in and of itself.
Yeah. I'm looking around like, how do you do what?
No, and it translates from like the highest stake moments, right, to the smallest little details. And I fully shout out the audio team for this, but you know, when you're driving around in Yara in your car, you know, they set up a system where song comes on the radio, Danny's going to sing along in Spanish to the song on the radio. And it was something that the moment it came on, it just felt so natural, and you felt so connected to the region, and to see the fans react to that as well, like, oh man, this is what I do, you know, like when I'm driving around. So I think it's both the bigger sort of high stakes moments and those personal little ones that you want to grab onto.
Yeah, I completely agree with that.
Yeah.
Okay, for our next topic, what I want to hear is a story about a time in development where you were like, y'all are taking on a challenge. I mean, look, developing a video game, something I've never been personally involved in, but I know is like a monumental challenge in so many ways. Is there a way, in your experience on Far Cry, that like we took on this tough thing, or this obstacle arose, and you know what, we surmounted it, we found a way to go around or through or transmute it into something that really ended up being kind of a shining part of one of these games, something we were really proud of? And what do you think?
Putting me on the spot there.
Yes, that's my job. That I do.
So yes, I think I've got one example. On Far Cry 5, while we were doing kind of our final reviews leading into shipping the game, someone asked the very important question, hey, when you're in the car, Boomer kind of just chases after you. Why is that? He should get in the car with you. I mean, he's your dog. He's your best friend. Like, we want to build that camaraderie with the characters, because all your other buddies jump in the car. So we looked into it, and it's the end of development. You don't add features at the end of development. And I mean, I know we just talked about, but
except in rare cases.
Yeah, except in very rare cases. But with this one, our very talented friends in Shanghai, who they were managing all of our animal features, looked into it, and it just was not something that was going to be able to make it for Far Cry 5. However, Far Cry New Dawn, you'll notice that our buddy Timber can jump in the car with you. And that was kind of the fruits of that effort. And I think it's something disappointing that happened that turned into something that was a net positive for the brand, for something that was fun to have in another really solid game. So.
I mean, when like a bouncy Akita jumps through the window and you drive off through this like super bloom apocalypse, like that, I mean, that's good stuff right there. I really remember Timber. What a good buddy.
My background on my computer is Timber in the car going, so it's perfect. It's perfect.
That is a happy ending I can get behind.
Yes.
Clint, tell me a little bit about Far Cry 2. Any particular kind of moment where you took something on and you made it happen despite...
Well, I mean, so again, first time we're making an open world first person shooter, and Far Cry 2, you may have noticed, doesn't have a mini map. And mini maps are tricky in an open world game because there's so much empty space and like it's very difficult. We didn't want a mini map because we wanted this very immersive HUD and this connection to the environment and this physicality. So we had this idea that we'd have this physical map that you would take out and you would read the map and it'd be on your lap when you're driving and all of this stuff. Turns out that this was really difficult for a lot of people. And we did a bunch of tests, like actual play tests, and got a bunch of data. Turns out, actually, weirdly, about 50% of human beings are what we came to call map turners. Like when they have a map, they do this with the map, right? And this is before everybody had a GPS on their phone. So it was like, this is how people would read maps. They would turn them around. And the other 50% of people are what we came to call head turners. If you turn the map, they get confused. And so me too. So the team was really divided, and we were arguing with each other all the time. Like, no, we need to make the map so that it turns, or like he turns the map, the character turns the map when you're moving, or whatever. And we're like, but then we would try it, and the other half of the people hated it, and everybody was always lost. It was super frustrating. And it was the art director who sort of came up with this pitch for the GPS device so that you would have this GPS with this map that rotated on it as well as the map in your hand. And it was expensive and it took a lot of time because it's quite a complicated thing it's actually the map that's being rendered twice on a different layer because we didn't have any memory budget to get a different map. It was really quite a complicated mess. But in the end, like the reality is we were facing a game where 50% of the players were lost all the time, and we could switch for the other 50%, but we couldn't have both until we came with this solution, and then that's what ended up shipping. It was weird.
Well, what a fascinating discovery, because as you're describing that, I'm like, I'm picturing when on my GPS it starts turning the map, and I'm like, who wants this? No, I hate this so much.
Yeah, me too. Drives me nuts.
But yeah, you can easily see the coin flips, and then very cool.
Yeah.
I'm a map turner. Like
that's okay.
Yeah,
there's no judgment here. No, absolutely.
I'm the other 50%.
Yeah.
Navid, on your various projects, on the various games, when some idea came together or some feature was implemented where you realize, like, okay, we've got this. This is a Far Cry. This is going to work. Our idea that we had, this has given us a vision to go forward and make this game what it's going to be.
Oh, sure. Okay. I think moment of crystallization, I remember very distinctly on Far Cry 6 was I'd worked on this scene with the guerrilla leader, Clara Garcia, and it's when the revolutionaries are kind of at their lowest, and she's trying to galvanize them. They're about to go into battle, and I had this sort of refrain in my head of, a revolution is not won by the fearless, it's won by the feared. And that is something that, goes back into my own family history of, fleeing a revolution, living a bit of that revolutionary experience, and there were a lot of protests happening, in the world at the time, and this notion of, it's okay to be scared, but what we're fighting for is so important. And when we went onto the mocap stage and the actor, Jess Aguero, started, giving her speech, and she's circling the campfire talking about, a revolution is not won by the fearless, it's won by the feared. And sort of that refrain being spoken, and then she goes into the sort of, what they're actually fighting for. It was the first time in my career where something I'd written wasn't mine anymore. And that's when you sort of know that you've landed on something, I think. And it goes, I think, throughout game development, right? When you've landed on something, it's like, this doesn't really belong to me anymore. This belongs to players. This belongs to people who are going to experience it. So that was one for me.
What a cool facet of the creative process, that moment where it switches over.
Yeah, it was out of body a little bit. You're like, is this happening? Okay.
It's a good thing.
Yeah, I think so.
Now, folks, we are wrapping up here, but before I let you go, before I let JC and Drew go, I asked them about sort of their favorite Far Cry moments. I'm going to take a little bit of a different tack with y'all. I want your favorite Far Cry, like we've talked about the animals, okay? Now, amigos, fangs for hire, whatever you want to call them, if you had to get one of these as a pet, one for you to bring home, be your animal companion over the course of all the creatures we've met and been accompanied by over the course of the years. Who are you picking? Anybody want to volunteer?
Oh, this is easy for me. I've already gauged all of the pluses and minuses. You know what? Cheeseburger. He's got a special diet that he has to go because he's diabetic bear. Probably difficult.
His name's Cheeseburger.
Yeah. Peaches. Peaches is very picky, kind of violent.
Yeah.
Chorizo's cute, but I would feel bad taking him away from his posse. Boomer.
Boomer.
100%.
Yeah.
Boomer. Boomer's my buddy.
Yeah.
I'll bring Boomer home.
Also, probably the most socially acceptable choice. Let's be honest.
Almost for sure, yes.
I'd say chorizo. My brain went straight to chorizo. I don't care about taking him from Philly.
No,
That's
see, I would feel so bad.
But it's only because literally I did take various chorizos home because we had on mocap they 3D printed this version of chorizo. It's really weird looking. It doesn't look right.
I have it on my Christmas
Oh, there
tree.
you go. Yeah, but yeah, he's adorable and just
chorizo artifacts at home. Is that what you're?
Yeah, maybe,
describing to me?
maybe,
Okay.
maybe. But yeah, I have a special connection to chorizo.
Mhm,
I think that we had this whole thing of killing people with kindness. It sounds messed up now saying it out loud, but he squeaks around and he distracts enemies with his cuteness, and then you can take them out.
Listen, that's discussing Far Cry. It sounds messed up now saying it out loud, but that's kind of comes up a lot.
Yeah,
here.
there you go.
There's a crocodile or an alligator, right?
Yeah, guapo.
Guapo.
Like,
Because
yeah.
I say that because actually there were animals in Far Cry 2, but there were no pets or anything like that.
Mhm.
Yeah, right.
But it was a feature I wanted. Speaking about requests that never made it in, I wanted crocodiles in the game, and people were like, "We can't get the AI can't swim. If the AI goes in the water, they just die.
Mhm.
If you knock them off a boat, they just instantly die." And it's just it was just challenges in development, and it's just AI swim is a feature that got cut. But I was like, but what we could do if they fall in the water is just have them do this and then have a crocodile grab them and spin around and go under, and that's it. It's all fake. But
Yeah,
please,
just the animation will play.
Please,
Yeah.
please.
Right.
And no, they wouldn't let me do it. And ever since I just that's the one feature. It's just eye candy. It's not even doesn't even matter.
Count it.
They still just die.
Yeah,
But I just wanted it so much.
Yeah.
We couldn't get it. So yeah.
I like that you specified the
crocodile for-
spin because I've
yeah,
seen
the death
Guapo
roll, the death
do
roll.
the death spin. Yeah.
The spin is
Oh.
crucial.
Yeah.
And Guapo has that fancy little jacket.
Oh yeah.
He's a cutie. He's a cutie.
He's got some good fits, that's for sure. Clint, Navid, and thank you so much for joining this discussion, helping to celebrate 20 years of Far Cry. Do you have any last shout out to anyone or reflection that you wanna share before we go?
I mean, absolutely. I've been very blessed over 17, 18 years or something in my case to have fans who've been there supporting Far Cry 2, sharing their thoughts about it, writing amazing things about it, really thinking deeply about the game. It's been a source of strength for me for decades, I guess. So yeah, I mean, very, very much appreciated.
Yeah, I'll just give a huge shout out to, I've worked on a lot of Far Cries, and each team was unique and different and exciting, and we had tough times, we had great times, but all of them are so fantastically talented. So just a huge shout out to everyone who's ever worked on a Far Cry, and also the fans, right? It's a priceless circle that we have there.
Right.
And yeah, I want to jump in just to say thank you to all of you as well. I think in my time on Far Cry, I've gotten some really heartwarming and wonderful. I'm getting choked up just thinking about it because we've gotten some really great stories from people who have talked to us about how much our games have affected their lives. So keep playing. Thank you so much for your support, and keep on rocking the Far Cry boat.
Thank you all once again. And thank you folks for tuning in. This is going to wrap up our Far Cry 20th anniversary celebration. A few things before you go. All the Far Cry games are right now on super sale, so if any of these stories have sparked your interest to go back to a favorite or explore a new one, now's a great time to pick it up. We've also got the board game coming out later this summer, plus the first issue of the manga on May 4th on Free Comic Book Day and May 8th digitally. Follow all these socials that you see on screen if you want to keep up with the latest from Far Cry. And thanks again for watching. We'll see you next time.